Welcome, welcome. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're coming from. Um, I'm really, really honored to be able to welcome all of you here into this space. My name is Olivia Ford. My pronouns are she and they. I am the editorial director of the Wall Project and honored to be part of this community, but I'm also a very proud member of the Center for HIV Law and Policy Advisory Board. And when I say that I'm really, you're really in for just a really, really powerful hour and a half of walking through the process of just planning for the next couple of years and strategizing and sort of grounding CHLP in the work of this beloved community that we're all part of. I'm just just glad to have all of your presence here. And I believe that we are going to start off with, as we look forward and look at and look at this just absolutely beautiful strategic plan and kind of pillars that hold it up as well, materials that go along beside it. We're going to start by looking back and bringing in a little bit of the 20th anniversary celebration that we've been moving through with CHLP in the past year with a video, with the CHLP20 video. So I believe that that's queued up.
My connection with CHLP really starts with my connection with Catherine Hansen. The types of discrimination that people with HIV often face, which was in accessing healthcare or being healthcare providers. Some of the big organizations thought those cases weren't the types of cases that would win, so they didn't take them. Catherine thought differently, and I think that's one of the main reasons she started CHLP.
I had a podcast in 2015, and Catherine Hansen used to come on my show. Me and another advocate by the name of Brian Jones had also worked with CHLP on HIV criminalization, advocating on behalf of Nushan Williams. I knew that I was actually working to help change somebody's life with CHLP.
CHLP was a major force in both helping me in my role at the White House understand the impact of these laws and policies, as well as what could be done to help change them. We were able to create a comfortable space where these high-powered state and county attorneys generals were able to ask questions of CDC officials about HIV in a setting like the White House.
Catherine was doing a really great job of monitoring coercive testing requirements, coercive treatment trends, and how that was factoring into criminalization and this link between the autonomy of people living with HIV, the basic human rights of people living with HIV under Mandisa's leadership over the last few years, bringing a squarely Black liberationist lens to that conversation, I think is where CHLP has evolved.
The Center for HIV Law and Policy stepped in to provide supporting documentation to explain why I shouldn't have to be on the registry in New York State. And it wasn't until 2021 that that appeal was finally granted and able to move forward. And the Center for HIV Law and Policy wrote a wonderful amicus brief.
CHLP staff is phenomenal. Every time we do an education session with CHLP, whether it's a panel discussion, whether we're doing a workshop at a conference, we get at least 2 new state partners wanting to do this work.
It is a great honor and a great responsibility to have been asked by Catherine, our founder, to lead CHLP in this next moment. I see it as my life's work in this moment, especially in the political moment that we're in, where innovation is needed. I realized it was time for us to publicly identify as an abolitionist organization. And so it was an amazing process to talk with the staff about what that meant, next steps, and to make that public in our mission, in our vision, and in our value statement.
I love the direction that the Center for HIV Law and Policy is going in. Continue to stay close to community. Salute you celebrating 20 years. Keep going. Let's keep going together.
I want to see you guys stay around for a long time because I'm going to need you when somebody has an issue.
It's not often the case that a couple decades into an organization's history, it is still full of energy, vital, and I think that's absolutely true of CHLP.
We all play a role and we're all needed and necessary. So I look forward to working with you all for the next 20 years as we get over this hump.
We are in the fight of our lives, and we just got to keep on loving on each other hard. I thank you again for your work. Encourage you to stay strong, keep fighting. We will be here to have your back.
Everything that you all have been doing for the last 20 years has changed so many different lives. And I just want to make it very clear as we celebrate these 20 years, one of those lives include mine.
Happy anniversary, CHLP. 20 looks really good on you.
I've seen that video so many times, and it's just always a powerful reminder of the role of CHLP in our community. And I'm sure that I'm not alone in this gathered group of folks in having been aware and really knowing about CHLP's work for the entire the full time that I've been in this field, which is almost the amount of time that CHLP has existed. It's 20 years, and it's just been an absolute honor to watch and play the tiniest role in just ushering in the next kind of series of years and moves that CHLP is making. And you are in for such another treat to get to hear from a person who is just absolutely instrumental in just partnering with CHLP and moving the staff and the community that surrounds CHLP through the process that birthed the doula, essentially, that sort of birthed the process and the plan that we're about to walk through today. I am pleased to introduce Ms. Shayna Turner from Community Solstice, who is going to be moving us through the next round of introductions and preparation for our journey today. Hi, Shayna.
So much, Olivia. Good afternoon, everybody. It was my honor to steward CHLP through this visioning process, and I'm so excited to share the plan with you today. The purpose of this process was to create a map for CHLP's strategic direction throughout the next several years, an implementable plan that will serve as a compass to guide CHLP in deciding how to apply its people power and how to allocate its resources. This vision was co-created by the entire CHLP staff, with significant input and guidance from advisory board members and people who represent the ecology of the national movement to decriminalize health, folks that come from peer organizations, partners, and members of coalition that CHLP is a part of. It was really important, and I want to start here, that we made this a participatory process. Oftentimes, strategic plans are created by executive leadership, board members, and then decisions are told to the staff. The team holds responsibilities for actualizing the goals outlined in the plan. This participatory approach was rooted in the belief that it is necessary to meaningfully engage those who hold responsibilities for implementation, along with representatives of those directly affected by the outcomes. Facilitated participatory decision-making encourages transparency, builds muscle to share responsibility for the work, and applies shared values to problem solving. The team, alongside executive leadership, are the hands and eyes, hearts and minds that makes the work happen. Engaging staff in the process allowed for the people doing the work to prioritize what they know is most resonant. Now, it was also really important to be mindful of how much time, labor, and responsibility we put on the shoulders of staff, board, and stakeholders so that folks were involved meaningfully without being overtaxed. And that responsibility fell to the core team stewarding this process. To be able to come to the clearly defined goals in this plan, we went really deep into exploring how CHLP believes that their work builds toward their vision for change. For example, we wrestle with what it means to be abolitionists, to create a culture that addresses health from a place of justice, supportive accountability, and care, while working with those whose aim it is to maintain the existing carceral systems where punishment is the response. It takes time and space to decide how to keep strong in our beliefs as we navigate these tensions. These deep dives into the heart and soul of why and how CHLP does their work also created educational tools. There's many components within this plan that can be integrated into CHLP's webinars, trainings, and outreach materials. One thing we discovered through talking with stakeholders, the people that CHLP does their work with, is that people wanted to better understand how the organization has arrived at some of its analyses and stances, especially the more radical and bold positions. People often wondered, what is it that makes the people at CHLP believe what they believe? Why are they willing to take the risks they take? What information and experiences led to their conclusions? So by having shared language, understanding of ideas, educational materials, and unison of vision among the team at CHLP, folks are more able to clearly talk about their work with the individuals and organizations they're building with. Deepening a shared understanding of the overall work gave the team opportunities to explore how their positions function in concert with each other as a whole. There's a Swahili proverb that says, "A boat doesn't go forward if each one is rowing their own way." We looked at how each team member's part fit together to accomplish the goals. This plan will also serve as a reflection tool to assess what's working well and what pivots need to be made as the plan unfolds within an ever-changing terrain, because conditions are not static. The ground under our feet shift, right? Depending on what's happening politically, environmentally, and socially. So we make a plan that gives us a vision of where we're going. It gives us some directions, some parameters to keep us on track, and then things change. A policy change might drastically shift the conditions that define the terrain we're used to traveling on. A road splits open, so we can't keep going in that direction. We have to recalibrate. Maybe an idea we thought was great doesn't land well once they put it into action. Embedded in this plan are regular intervals of dedicated times for the team responsible for following through with these commitments to be able to evaluate how things are going, to better synchronize their work plans, to celebrate achievements, assess the political, environmental, and social landscape, and determine what pivots are needed in the ways that CHLP practices achieving its goals. So how did we come to these goals? How did we determine these parameters? How did we create this map? We began by building from existing cultural practices of the group that are healthy and effective. We built from agreements that the team has to help communicate, move through tensions and conflict, and hold each other accountable for follow-through. We built from that foundation to create agreements for this process rooted in the values of principled struggle and care. We reflected on where the organization has been, what it's achieved, what it's learned from mistakes, and what repairs may be needed in relationships that CHLP has with folks where there may have been some unresolved conflict. We examined the existing arrangement of power within the organization. How are decisions made? Where is there alignment or gaps between people's levels of responsibility and their levels of authority, as well as if they have access to the required resources to do what they're responsible for doing? We asked how accountability is matched with support. We grounded our work in an exploration of why CHLP exists, what they believe needs to happen to create a world where people living with HIV and other stigmatized health conditions are met with compassion and the resources to thrive. That's the big picture, the heart of why CHLP does everything it does. We define the specific areas that are the core of CHLP's work. Everyone has their lane. What are the particular and specialized areas that define CHLP's lane? And we identified the primary strategies that move those core areas forward. We dug into naming the beliefs and assumptions at play behind each strategy, because none of this is neutral. Like I mentioned before, CHLP takes decisive and often bold political stances on issues that affect our lives. The political is personal. So we named the intended outcomes, the changes that CHLP intends to make, and we mapped how those intended outcomes work toward actualizing the vision of the world we want for our people. We burrowed into the question of how. How does enacting these strategies achieve these outcomes? We did a deep dive to identify all of the programs and initiatives that CHLP runs or participates in. We looked at how these efforts create the change that CHLP wants to make happen and prioritize which ones to put weight behind. Throughout the next year, during our quarterly reflection sessions, we'll assess which of these programs and initiatives are functioning effectively and which need more tender love and care. On that note, we'll also continue to assess what areas of organizational infrastructure need to be strengthened to support the team's capacity to work this plan. Most importantly, we answered the question of who CHLP needs to work together with in order to build the political realities that they're striving for. Who are the people, communities, and organizations that CHLP is interdependent with? We explored what CHLP offers to peers, partners, coalitions, advocacy groups, lawyers, lawmakers, state and federal stakeholders, and also what it receives from each of those formations. There are some things CHLP is dependent on from others in order to do their work. CHLP has their finger on the pulse of what's relevant to people living with HIV in different parts of the country because of their relationship with advocates on the ground and coalitions that they're a part of. There's an interdependence here. Let's name it. Let's make it visible. We also named the justice movements that CHLP seeks to deepen relationships with. We don't have to know everything individually. Collaboration and cooperation help us to be stronger and sharper. Asking and answering the question of who CHLP needs to work with in order to accomplish their goals resulted in a map of the ecology of the national movement to decriminalize health. Working as a team to co-create this vision was in large part possible because the organization's leadership was willing to share power with the team. Shout out to the incomparable Mandisa Moore O'Neill for respecting the leadership and expertise of staff. Jada, Daylene, Matt, D, Kay, Sean, Amir, Nix, Stephen, and Katira, whose wisdom is woven into every page of this plan. CHLP built this vision together, and that's where so much of their strength lies as they fight for our people and build toward this world that we all deserve. Thank you each for showing up today and for caring about this work. Now I would like to introduce the director of CHLP, Mandisa Moore O'Neill, who will walk us through some highlights from the plan.
Hey, y'all. First of all, Shayna, thank you for that overview of the process. I've been a boohooey mess all day. And the reason why I've been that way is a reason why this process has been so intentional. I am going to share the plan. I know that's what folks are here for. But first, I have to start again with thanking everyone at CHLP. Each of you made this possible, and I hope that you see what you gave in the plan, because I do. And the next thing I will say is, not that I'm biased or anything, but what makes this plan so amazing is the way that it's rooted. You know, I'm a Black Southerner, and I live in the Gulf Coast, in a very particular part of the Deep South. And tree roots is what has meant our survival. You know, like big trees that are deeply rooted in the ground withstand hurricanes and have done so for hundreds of years. And so as you see in the plan, or as you will see in the plan, trees and plants and roots are a huge part of the theme of the plan. And also it's what has made it possible for us to go as deep and as wide as we need it to be in order to meet our political moment. So without further ado, let's get into the plan, y'all. I'm just so excited to share it with y'all. Next slide, please. Here's a little bit about CHLP. It's also really intentional that we've been around for 20 years. And at our 20th year celebration is when we are debuting our first ever strategic plan. It's an opportunity for us to reflect, like really reflect, like actually spend time looking at every aspect of our organization, not just what other people think, but what we think about the things, like the amazing things that we've done in the 2 decades, and to also use that and to ground that as we look forward. Sankofa moment, that's a term that folks are familiar with. It's the idea of you go back in order to move forward. It's a way of being in opposition to white supremacist ways of looking at time, in which everything just moves in a linear fashion, when in actuality, time is cyclical. And this process really showed how it's important to look forward and look back in order to do our work. Next slide, please. Next one. So we started with a dedication, and it was important, again, that this plan be rooted in what it is that we're here to do, and to make sure it's grounded in all of the people who have made our work possible, especially those AIDS activists and organizers and advocates in the 80s who lived outside of the coast, right? Like the mamas and the uncles and the lovers who made such a pathway for us. And it was also important that as part of our dedication is that you, the readers, engage this document and see it as what it is, like a tool of liberation and growth. So, and to be clear, this is going to be a teaser. I'm not going to go into too much detail because the idea is for y'all to engage it yourself. So my hope is that you are intrigued enough to want to keep on engaging this text. Next slide. One of the best parts of this process that Shana outlined is taking time to talk about what words mean, right? As a Black feminist, I often take issue with how we talk about intersectionality, right? In these ways that not only invisibilize Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, but also invisibilize a framework that has always been centered around Black women. And it's many words like that. It's not just about taking an issue, it's about being clear with each other as an organization, but also being clear with our peer organizations and external partners and potential, external partners as to what we mean when we say these things. And, maybe we're extra. We took it a step further and made videos on certain words, like certain keywords. And I'm not going to show every video, but when you engage the plan, you can click on certain videos and see from a staff person definitions for certain words. But I am going to play the one for patriarchal violence, which is narrated by Katira Epps, our public health and advocacy strategist. Gives you a little taste of what to look forward to in the whole plan.
When we say patriarchal violence is the systematic, cultural, and interpersonal forces that discriminate, harm, and oppress women, girls, and trans and gender non-conforming people. It can also affect men who do not fit into dominant ideas of manhood, such as queer and trans men. It opposes and enacts the patriarchy to position men above gender and sexual minorities in a sex-based hierarchy. This can look like abortion and gender-affirming care bans that take away bodily autonomy, to interpersonal violence against cis and trans women from their partners, or hate crimes against queer people. Patriarchal violence intersects with other forms of oppression, such as racism and classism, to disproportionately affect people of color and poor people.
We see this in the pay gaps experienced by Black, Indigenous, and migrant women, or the welfare queen stereotype for Black women. Those who experience patriarchal violence are at greater risk of HIV criminalization due to unfounded, dangerous assumptions of people living with HIV based on homophobia, transphobia, anti-Blackness, and misogyny that lead to stigma, criminalization, and further subjugation.
I just love that video. So yes, this glossary is something that is important to include in our strategic plan because, again, it makes it clear this is what we mean when we say abolition. This is what we mean as we talk about a phrase that perhaps is new for CHLP, other stigmatized health conditions. So it's a thick glossary, and the intention of each word is there, and I look forward to future engagement. Next slide. It was also important to include a weather report. Again, I, live on the Gulf Coast where for many of us, having a keen assessment of the conditions has literally meant our survival. That's no different for the political work that we're engaging in. Oftentimes systems have constructed things in a way in which we're told to just do work, or to act like our work isn't happening in a particular context. And as Shana mentioned, let's name the thing. Let's provide an assessment of the conditions that this plan, that CHLP, and that our ecology, which all of y'all are a part of, is existing in. As is written in the report, our strategic plan is the how we deal with our assessment, what that means for how we move forward. And the weather report is the why. And of course, there's a quote from the Combahee River Collective statement in which they share their assessment, because again, they are doing work in a particular context, and they offered that as the grounding for how and why. So, the weather report. Next slide, please. This was one of the most intentional processes as well, and it was our theory of change. How Shana stewarded that really was remarkable. Oftentimes in this work, especially as a Black feminist, especially as an abolitionist, oftentimes a critique that we hear or a challenge that we have received is the ways in which our work is theoretical, right? Or like it's not grounded in reality. And if you've actually done this work and actually engaged, it's actually very grounded in reality. And what I love about all of these processes is we took this intent and we took this theory and we took these principles and we thought long and hard about how to actualize them in goals, how to tighten up strategies and how to map out activities based on that. And the first step in doing that, it was landing on a theory of change. It's a dense document intentionally. Our three main strategies are listed. And the part that I really want to highlight is how we talk about through an abolitionist lens. It was important that as an abolitionist organization, like that abolition not be a program, right? Like that it not be a staff position, right? Or like somebody whose job it is to be the abolitionist. But no, every aspect of our work, both internal, external, is through an abolitionist lens. And so that's why it's written this way. It's not a particular program, it's every aspect of the work that we do. Next slide, please. Then comes the transforming intent into action. This is where we take the 3 strategies that we talked about in the theory of change in the TOC. And then we, again, as was mentioned earlier from Shayna, we talk about some assumptions that underline each of these. And the reason why we talk about assumptions is it's important, again, is the theme here of naming how and why and what we're bringing into this work. Oftentimes, again, in spaces, it's this idea of objectivity, right? Like this idea that like we bring nothing and the work transforms us. And how do we be clear? We do bring into the work. And how does that then guide what the goals are based on the strategies and the activities that we make based on the goals and the strategies. And then for each strategy, it's a list of activities and there are high priorities because there are things that are especially important, again, based on a keen assessment of the conditions that we're in. So it, again, is 3 different strategies. And so we go into the activities for each of them. And the next couple of slides show this. Strategy 2, policy research and analysis, and strategy 3. And I could keep talking about this plan. And here's an opportunity to hear from some of my colleagues and to hear their thoughts as far as what this process meant to them, their experience in the process, and particular parts of the plan that they want to highlight. And so with that said, I'm going to turn to our senior PJP attorney, Jada Hicks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jada Hicks. I use she, her pronouns. And as Mandisa said, I'm the Senior Positive Justice Project, or PJP attorney. And PJP is our national campaign to end the criminalization of HIV and other stigmatized health conditions. It is honestly beyond exciting to be here and talking to you about the strategic plan. This has been years-long endeavor for CHLP to undertake. I was actually just joking before we started this webinar about how it's almost as old as my son. And so it feels phenomenal to be able to unveil it, and at the same time as we are celebrating our 20 years. And so since this marks our first official strategic plan, I went into this process a little nervous. I just was not sure what to expect. And there definitely was some education that needed to be done with staff in terms of the goals and purpose of a strategic plan. I want to acknowledge up front that this can feel daunting to take this process on, but it was so rewarding and I learned so much along the way. So going through the strategic planning process made it clear that the plan will not only strengthen how the PJP team approaches and engages in our work, but will also support CHLP as a whole by providing a living roadmap for us. And what really stood out for me and what has been mentioned previously was just how intentional the process was. And the way we approached this process was itself a praxis of our abolitionist politic. It was deeply collective and values driven. And some of the most engaging moments honestly came from working in smaller groups and then reporting back to all of the staff. It made it visible how our individual insights fit into our larger collective vision. And the other thing about that too is that it was really cool to see how much in alignment we all were, even when we were breaking out in these smaller groups and then reporting back. It was like, yes, 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 from the rest of staff, just like everyone was on the same page for a large portion of what we were reporting back. And while there are several strong components of the plan, I want to turn to the particular section that I love and want to highlight, which is the ecology section. And so this portion, of our strategic plan details where we are where we as a movement come from and whose shoulders we stand on, who we do this work with, and which movements intersect with HIV justice and it explains our role in the work that we hold and the interconnectedness of CHLP and our partners. And honestly, one of the things that I loved most about this as well, it's one thing to think about your partners in your head. It's another thing to really be able to visually see how all of those pieces connect with one another. And it emphasizes relationship building and collaboration, both internally and across movements. And that focus feels critical to our work and reflects a clear understanding that change requires a coordinated, principled partnership rather than siloed efforts. In my role at CHLP, I see this and our strategic plan as a living framework that will directly shape how I prioritize work, build strategy, and engage with partners. And it offers shared language and clear commitments that make it easier to stay grounded in our values while navigating day-to-day demands and long-term goals. I also wanted to highlight the ecology section because it is just so visually appealing to me. I know Dee gets shouts out on our webinars, and you'll actually be able to hear from Dee herself on this webinar. But to see her bring to life staff descriptions and vision in this way is, I mean, it's phenomenal. We sat around a table and described, if we were doing an ecology and we were describing CHLP's relationship to this work and people living with HIV is at the center of this work, what would that look like? And what would I feel like, Shana, you had us sit back in our chairs and just envision like this perfect world. What would that look like? And we all were shouting out, like, I would see flowers, gardens, breaking away from jails, roots, and all of that is encompassed in this ecology. And it's so well reflective of us in that moment of sharing our vision for the work that we do. And even now, it honestly gives me chills thinking about all of us sharing that space together. And then now seeing how Dee took what we envisioned and brought it to life. And so for me, this section just sticks out and really highlights all of the hard work, collaboration, thought process that went into this strategic plan. And one thing that I want the audience to know is this is so much more than just a document. It's a reflection of who we are and how we practice our politics. The process mattered just as much as the outcome. And that intentionality is embedded throughout every piece of the plan itself. I really hope that folks engage with the strategic plan as something dynamic and collective. Read it, reference it, use it as a tool for accountability, alignment, imagination. I really hope it sparks imagination for other folks. And I think we all hope that it inspires other organizations to pursue strategic planning processes that are truly collaborative and transparent. And with that, I will turn it over to Daylene, our operations manager.
Hey y'all, hey, I'm Daylene, she, her. I am the CHLP operations manager. I definitely wrote something before I came, and I definitely ditched it right before I hit the camera. So like the old pastor say, I won't be before you long, but I wanted to touch on my process and how I felt being involved with this plan. As an operations person, sometimes you're usually on the outskirts of a lot of things. You're just like in the mechanical or, behind the scenes. But to be so engulfed and collaborative in this really helps me put passion to the actual work that I do and like understanding like actually what I'm doing here, at CHLP. One thing that I wanted to also mention is that I was on the planning team and also with staff collaboration. So I have like a twofold perspective. So like with the planning team, we would come up with ways to like framework to break the process up to staff to get the right information, to get their feedback, and to like be a part of that, and then come and like give my feedback and like, say how this connects to my work, and then we add the words to the paper, was something that was challenging at times, but also very enriching. It was a lot of political education throughout this as well. There's a lot of things, especially with that glossary. I learned a lot of things while doing that, and also adding my input and knowledge. Also, something that I want to mention that was challenging was the theory of change. Um, and I say challenging not in a way that was like something I felt that I couldn't do, but challenging in a way that it challenged my thought. It challenged my intentions. It helped me realize, is what we're doing actually connected to our mission and our vision? And is it attainable? Is it logical? Is it realistic? Who are we actually touching and affecting? And to like have those three core goals and like bring it into something that was like, this is what we want to have, to have a theory, to look to the future, to look to something that also can be shifted, like Shayna mentioned. So I really enjoyed that because it really made me be like, is this what we really are doing? Is this something that, we mean what we say? Are we actually putting our foot on the pavement? And I feel like this theory of change really like checked us and made us interrogate like our work and keep us in line. So I also want to say what I want the audience to take away from it, to piggyback off Jada, is that I want them to know that every letter, every word, I mean, there were some times we would be talking about a word and a sentence for like an hour because we were so intentional about what we wanted to represent and what we wanted to put out in the world. And I agree with Jada, like I want it to be used as a resource, something you refer back to, something that can be your framework, something that you can like use as a blueprint for what you want to do and share out. So I'm just so appreciative of being a part of this. I'm so excited. And thank you. And I now want to introduce Dee, the maker of this wonderful, wonderful graphic that you see before you.
Hey there, everyone. I'm Dee Resnick, she, her. I'm the comms manager at CHLP. I have been around CHLP for a minute. So as an OG, I'm excited to be here today to help introduce this vision for what comes next. Like everyone here, I've been involved throughout the planning process, but I'm going to talk a little about my role in designing the publication. So jumping right in with the colors. It is all earth tones, and we've got some handwritten type and lots of patterns showing the weather, land, waves, circles, and line drawn symbols are mixed in with leaves and branches that are growing all over and appearing as we move throughout the book. The style is intentionally natural, it's textured, it's layered, and that's meant to reflect the richness and the depth, both of the process and of the content itself. And that's because this was a very organic process. Like what you're looking at grew out of these readings, writings, conversations, the pouring over of words, intent, and a lot of attention to detail. And so going from there, design-wise, the question is, what do you want people to take away from this? How do you want them to feel? For this project, I think the answer comes from that process, but it also comes from us asking ourselves, how do we feel about this? And we did this a little with our new abolition webinar series as well. Like, what do we want this to look like? Some of the symbolism and imagery that's associated with abolition are broken chains and bars and the things that visually represent systems of prisons and policing that we're actively moving away from. And I think we've been working together to figure out and create a vision for what we're working toward and how we're moving forward and beyond that, right? It's really what we want people to see. So, and not to go back to we're going to go back to the ecology section for just a second, even though Jada did touch on it. We're just going to look at it again for a minute, because I think it really reflects that idea of us tending to this garden and growing something that nourishes ourselves and everybody around us, right? So on this first page, you'll see this progression, right, from prisons and jails down in the corner, and pulling them apart, knocking them down. But, you know, like with abolition, that's not where this story ends, right? It's really just the beginning. We are then working the land, we're planting, watering, growing, and then finally sitting with our people in those fields in the sun. So this really is the journey that we're on, right? And the world that we're trying to build together. And then if we jump to the lineage page in the back of this ecology section, as Jada mentioned, this reflects exactly what it is, which is us naming people and groups that each of us stand on. So this is all layered with those references, all meant to look like it was a giant idea board where we all hand wrote names and we scribbled here and there, and we made drawings and so on. And now this page, which is at the end of the ecology again, it's surrounded by the flowers and the vines, and we have little creatures now in those vines as well. We have birds and bees and butterflies, which are all pollinators, right? So that's really the statement here. Everyone that inspired us brought us these seeds, and now we're ready to spread them around again. So, so taking a step back again, the book, it balances these imaginative parts like the ecology with the more technical parts, the strategies and daily, so that chain, right? It's meant to like contain, but also reflect all of these multitudes, and all of these pieces that speak to the history of our people, the organization, HIV justice, abolition, are just layering on top of each other throughout the book. And they're coming together into this cohesive, hopefully inspiring, future forward narrative for change at CHLP and for our whole movement. So with that, I will pass the mic back to Olivia for some Q&A.
Oh, thank you all so much, CHLP team, and also just all of the gathered community members who are sharing their thoughts and their relationships with CHLP and with the word that you're hearing there in the chat. Please keep it up. I know that folks must have questions, must have pieces of their own reflections that they want to bring into this space and inquire and bring their curiosity. So please keep that coming in the chat. And again, just to speak a little bit more about just all of the reflections on this bold vision that are just washing over me and over all of us. I'm so grateful to have it in the world, this plan and this vision to be a tangible reminder to me. I'll personalize it, to make space to reflect on and communicate with our teams and our people about, and just live into our purpose in this work, and the boldest possible realization of that. So just really, really glad to be here. And I am going to, as I hope that folks are starting to drop questions into the chat, I'll be checking out the chat and moderating those some, calling them out, and you'll see the questions on the screen, I believe, as we verbalize them on y'all's behalf. And I'm gonna invite Mandisa and Shayna back to hold that Q&A space. Let's see, do we have our first question? Oh, let me give the floor to y'all if you want to frame the Q&A anymore while I investigate and see if we've got any questions.
Oh no, I'm just the only thing I will say is I'm curious to hear. Okay, I see questions. Okay, Yeah, but I'm just curious to hear people's thoughts. Okay. Oh, Hutchins. I'm so interested to hear more on the quarterly. And then Nathan, when can we see the document? Oh, it's coming. And then check-ins, how will you monitor progress? Did you want to start as far as the quarterly part, Shayna?
Sure. So such an important part of any kind of like planning process is having time to be able to check in about progress, right? So we will be meeting quarterly starting in January to really like set off the beginning launch of the integration of the goals and people's work plans, people's specific like questions, ideas, where the rubber hits the road. And then we'll be meeting quarterly to be able to assess like how are things going. You know, we'll create a template to be able to like look through to do a scan at what needs pivoting, you know, what shifts need to be made, what supports do people need, what's coming up that we didn't anticipate. And also like real talk, some things become less relevant, you know, once you start putting it into place. So to be able to have the opportunity not only to make changes, but to really like hold follow through, just as important, if actually more important than the planning itself. A lot of times that's where strategic planning processes like go to sleep and never wake back up, right? They get put on a shelf. And it was like, even if it was a really robust process, like the work of it being a living document and engaging it is such an essential part of like keeping it alive and integrating it into the daily. And that's like with I don't know if you want to speak to this, Mandisa, but like monitoring progress. Yeah, do you have a thought about that?
Yeah, so excuse me. Quarterly is intentional, in part because of the weather report that we spent time doing. Conditions are shifting in a way where that kind of touch point, it gives us an opportunity to do two things: to assess what our response needs to be in the shifting landscape and to actually make those shifts. Whereas I think if it was twice a year or even yearly, then to me, it's doing exactly what Shayna has warned against, about having this beautiful document where all of this time and care went into it and having this amazing launch event. And then it's another document on the website. When like, this is actually a plan that we are using. Like there's a fundraising strategy that is built off of this. Like program teams are using this as far as like future work planning, all of that. And so quarterly is that balance as to how to actually assess. And monthly, I think, is too soon in terms of assessment. Isn't always something like as far as that can happen quickly. And my challenge is oftentimes we don't actually take the time to fully assess. And so this, to me, again, is a good balance of that time. Yes, it's a living document process. There was another question about why a strategic plan now. Yeah, I mean, it's our 20-year moment, you know, like it's been a year of a celebration like that started in our first home in New York City in February. And one of the things that attracted me to CHLP to come into leadership here is the amazing work that we've done. Sometimes like when it was unpopular. And so this was an opportunity to me to fully honor that work and to take it in new places or to expand. And strategic plan to me was an opportunity like for us, like to move outside of this paradigm that I experience nonprofits, movement orgs, which are different, like often fall into of the urgency is now, and the work must move. And what gets lost, who gets invisibilized if we only move at this constant speed of urgency and don't take the time to reflect, to assess, to say, hey, I didn't like that. Or, hey, oh my God, I really like that. More of this and less of that. And what are the things that we like, but we're not that good at yet? How do we take the time to actually be in all of that? And so this plan was an opportunity to do all of that and articulate what the next 4 years is going to look like. And I think we all know how pivotal these next couple of years is going to be. Like, as I say in the weather report, like this next period of time, it's going to help determine if we're under the rubble or if we are dancing on top of the rubble, because it's clear that things are falling and we can't be like in a denial about that. So.
Beautiful. We've got this next question from Charles Stevens, my sibling on the advisory board. What role would you like for CHLP superfans, comrades, and friends to play in supporting the strategic plan moving forward?
Ooh. Nathan, sorry. That's funny. My face is getting sore from smiling so much. One plan is to keeping it with us. Like as Shana mentioned, how many times have we seen organizations who have like the best of intentions, have a process and have an amazing document, and then that's it. And then 5 years, it's another process and another document that may or may not be built on the first document. We're being super intentional about not doing that. So keep it, and part of what helps us not do that is our super fans and comrades and friends, because like a part of being a friend and a comrade is engaging in principled struggle and challenging, right? Like the biggest way to show love, for me, is to be in a process of accountability. And so that's something that I'm hoping that the folks on this call, and the people that y'all are in community with, you work with, are able to do that. And to be clear, like oftentimes folks hear words like accountability or challenge and think it means it has to be this negative, experience, or this like ugly, tension-filled thing, when in actuality, it doesn't have to be. It could be like, hey, how's this going? You know what I mean? Like, how's this opportunity? So I think that is one way. And again, this is especially for folks who are like in CHLP, who are actually out, like external facing. It's also a chance to engage, more people in CHLP. So yeah, like I think that is a huge role. Oftentimes, historically and currently, just, keeping it 100, CHLP often finds ourselves, as the first or only, and so my hope is that we're not the only, ones who are agreeing to take these bold stands. I hope that this document, like this plan, also serves as an encouragement. If anyone on this call was thinking of doing that thing, do it.
All right, we've got a question from Andrea B. Williams. Thank you so much. Would you talk a bit about collective care as a team and how that fits into the strategic plan?
Absolutely. Do you want to start that one, Shana?
Sure. That's a really great question. One of the ways that collective care is built into the plan is in the emphasis on consistently having the commitment to look at if people's responsibilities are matched with support, so that folks have both the guidance, the resources, and the requiring levels of authority that match the levels of responsibility, so that they actually can do what it is that they're charged with doing, right? So that's an example of like everybody is looking to see how each other is having the support that they need to be able to follow through on what it is that they are responsible for. Now, I would love to hear from you, Mandisa, or from a team member more about this, because I'm not a part of the actual staff. But from what I've observed, this staff is really committed to being like full people with each other. So even something as simple as like we had a guest appearance, right, from your child, Olivia, on screen. We have families, like, to be able to bring our passions, right, for the staff to be able to bring what it is that motivates them to do this work as a part of the story. It is not compartmentalized. So there's room for people to connect with each other and like understand where each other is coming from. So like Jada was talking about, we did a lot of imagining of like, what is this world? What does it look like when this vision is actualized? And we also did a lot of the looking back. What is it that made you want to do this work? What did you experience in life that brought you to this point? So people's humanity is a part of the work. It's integrated into the way that people talk about the work with each other, into the way that decisions are made. It's not like, here we do our tangible work and over here we're people with families and communities. Those things are integrated very deliberately and very organically. So there's a lot more that can be said, but those are some of the things that rise to the top for me.
Yeah. And Andrea, thank you for this question. Something that, like stands out to me is this is our public facing document. There are actually aspects that we also put time and care that are for CHLP. And the biggest is we have a Darcy chart. You know, like perhaps folks have heard of it. It's a decision maker, accountable, responsible, consulting, and informed. You know, so it's a way for like looking at every aspect of how we operate, both our internal and external facing work operations, our PJP, our data privacy, aging, all of the things, fundraising, development, like all of that, comms, and being clear as to who is the D, who is the A, like who are the people who are responsible and who are the people who actually have the support to actually carry that responsibility, like in this way. And before we even got there, and this is something that I don't think is often seen as care, so thank you, Shana, for highlighting, is we spent time understanding what power is, what authority is, what control is. Like in our meeting, we're a remote organization. And so being able to see each other in person is just valuable. And so in a meeting we had in DC in May of 2024, Shana stewarded us through a process of like deeply understanding what these words mean and how they apply to the ways that you have power in CHLP. And to me, like, it's so much that we often talk about power as if it's this bad thing, when in actuality, we're literally here to build power. You know, like we just launched a whole plan about that, about like who has it and who we know needs to have it and how do we get there. So power can't be this bad thing if we're literally building, towards it. But how do we understand as far as what that means? And then also like care also looks like, not ending it at the launch of the plan. But I think it was Dee who said it, like, this is actually our beginning. You know, often in an abolition, especially like mainstream understandings of abolition, right? It's one in which it ends at the dismantling. And it's like, okay, we're literally just getting started. And so now that the plan is here, now comes, how do we do it? And for me, I'm always looking at, okay, what's needed in order for us to do it? Okay, I'm noticing this particular team is having a particular challenge. This lets me know a particular sort of support is needed to help them to actually actualize, or this lets me know something needs to be tweaked because we didn't know this obstacle was quite where it is. So how do we do that? And to me, like, that's how you actualize care, because again, it's a 4-year plan.
I just want to say a comment that Sean, one of the staff, wrote. He said, absolutely, we are whole people that bring our values and experience into every space. That is care in action.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I just want to very, very briefly lift up a little bit of what I was hearing before we move on to the next question, around just the connection between collective care and that whole person kind of humanity that everyone is able to bring, and the partners who work with CHLP are able to bring to the process, as being really strengthened by that piece around accountability and transparency. You know, is really, I mean, accountability as not a negative process, but an act of care, an act of community building, and really just the modeling around those pieces. The fact that, you know, just as individual humans, as individual staff members, as folks who are involved in the advisory board, there's not the need to hide when something's a challenge, or hide when or kind of skirt around it or not communicate about it, but really that transparency and accountability and space that's held as just being and just making that connection with collective care is just, you know, just absolutely vibrant through every aspect of this vision. All right, we have a question from Krista Martell, the Well Project in the house.
I have one more thing.
Please, yeah.
I would be so remiss, like, not to mention the timeline, and it's in my notes and I missed it. Part of, again, like, the intention and care was, and I just want to like highlight again, Dee Resnick and Stephen Williams, who's our research and comms consultant, who really put a lot of time into a 20-year timeline, which is also in the plan. Now, the full timeline is not in the plan. It's a link to it on the website. It would have added 20 pages because, you know, it's been a lot of shit that we've done. It's been amazing. So a link is in the plan, but that process also, and again, thinking of what Charles said about a historical text, yeah, like the timeline is there, and I hope people see it and engage it, and probably see like something that like you were a part of, you know, in there, because it starts back when like we had our first desk on Broadway.
Absolutely. So now taking it back to process for all our process queens. Krista asks, she's curious if you created a vision for your process around the strategic plan process. If you can kind of pull back the curtain a little bit more around that. Was there a template you're working from? A little bit came up in the beginning, but just elaborating some on that. Sheena, if you want to start.
Sure. Yes, it was not a template. It was very much tailored to it was very responsive, and it unfolded in an organic way. There was definitely a very clear vision set out for the components that we wanted to create. So from the beginning, we had a list of things that we wanted to do. Even like something like the weather report. Like we were like, we want to have a snapshot of this political moment at the time that this strategic plan is launched. And so we had like a table of contents at the beginning that really spelled out the parts of the plan that we wanted to create. We went through it. A lot of it was, based on different tools. I was the facilitator, and I worked with a core team that was made up of Daleen, Mandisa, Matt, and we worked very closely together to craft each step that was responsive to what was coming up for staff. And some of the things that we did that ended up being integrated into the plan, even though we didn't necessarily know that was going to happen at the beginning. There was some side bodies of work that I was also supporting, some organizational development things. For example, a revamp of the PJP principles. The Positive Justice Project wanted to take the principles that have been out for many, many years and just update them to like reflect the evolution of the work. In that process, we were able to really go deep into crafting not just language, meaning the words, but like the concepts, like what does this mean? How does this get practiced? How is it being like put into decision-making, work plans? And so we had some deeper clarifying language around CHLP's work that we were able to then bring to the rest of the staff, do some workshopping, integrate into the plan itself. Another example of that is the legal team built out an amicus brief clinic. And so we developed a process for deciding which amicus briefs is CHLP's to agree to take on. When does CHLP just sign on but doesn't take the lead on? When does CHLP say no? We created a decision tree. But part of what helped to get to that part was to define the core areas of CHLP's work. What was CHLP's lane? And so really like getting into the nucleus of it, it was like many, many, many conversations with the legal team and the entire staff. And then the advisory board weighed in. And then we had 25 people from the ecology that came in at different points, including you, right, Krista, at different points to be able to give feedback on this language. And it wasn't just about the word choice. It was like, okay, we are saying this is what CHLP does. This is the actual like lane and nucleus of the work. And so a lot of the process was very responsive. It was adapted. It was, just unfolded organically. But we definitely set out at the beginning with a clear list of the components that we wanted to create, and then brought in a lot of tools and methodologies. A lot of what we did in the beginning part was deepen shared understanding among the team of, like Mandisa mentioned, even the terminology of the words that we used in this process, which then became the template that we use for creating the glossary. So what are the words that CHLP uses and what do they mean? Because not only can a word be understood differently at large, you're talking about within the 11-person team. Are we all meaning the same thing when we say these words? And how do these concepts and these ideas reflect the way that we do the work? And so really taking the time to understand what each other's role is. We played a fun game near the beginning where it was like a dating game where everybody really got to present their program, right? Or their respective roles. So Daleen brought up a really good point. As somebody in operations, a lot of times non-programmatic staff are on the outskirts of these type of visioning processes. Everything is like front and center with the program and the external work. What are you going to do without your programs person? What are you going to do without your comms person, without your financial people, right? Everybody on the team is equally important. And so really being able to have space for each other to understand what each other does and how their respective work connects with each other was a big part of our grounding process as well.
Also, Krista, in 2023, we had a also super intentional process of updating our mission statement, and also in making a vision statement and a values statement. And that anchored this. Like first it's in the strategic plan, but it was referenced so often in our planning of this. So also like in addition to what Shana said, like we also had an actual vision that we also like were able to use to anchor us at various places. And thinking of what Daleen said earlier, as far as challenges, it's challenging to actually think through what it is that we actually believe. I think oftentimes like a lot of stuff gets like skipped over, or assumptions get made but not named. And so having Shana like lead us through a process of thinking through, okay, so is it that we believe people with HIV who are undetectable shouldn't be criminal? Like, okay, like how do we be clear that it's all people, who shouldn't be criminalized? It doesn't matter their viral load or things like that. So like parsing through, again, assumptions that oftentimes like we don't even know. And like how we did that is often referencing back our vision statement, our mission, and our values.
And thank you both so much for your vision and brilliance. If you wouldn't mind speaking briefly about some of the kind of information that you might have used to inform the strategic planning process. This is a question from Diane Burkholder. In light of the fact that so much of the field and framework is rooted in corporate and military culture.
Yes. So many different sources, but I will say that most of what I know, I've learned from Black feminism, queerness, and working class culture. And really, like any kind of tool that I might have like brought into this process, which I'll just name some places that were tools that I was inspired by or that I was able to integrate. The Movement Strategy Center, LANE, Leveraging a Network for Equity, the Annie Casey Foundation has a Theory of Change toolkit that was really helpful. But really, I would say that people who are doing this work, who understand the power and the value of moving with people, moving as understanding their position as a leader, as a position, and not an inherent value, right? It's not like this corporate approach where it's very technical, it's very hierarchical. There's not to say that there's not hierarchy in the way that decisions are made at CHLP, but there is so much value placed on caring about the impact. And so I think that you can talk about where do you find these tools, but really like whatever tools were brought in, it was brought in through a lens and a commitment to deeply care about and consistently be questioning, how does this affect people? How is this expanding and growing and deepening the capacity for this team to function together, to be able to move through conflicts together, to be able to share ideas, to be able to give each other feedback, to be able to co-create something. There were times where people weren't sure if what they had to offer was valuable. Take the time to actually address that and make room for those types of conversations so that we can have the richness of the tapestry that everybody contributes to. So to me, yes, there are some tangible tools. We are going to be creating like a synopsis of some strategic planning, like links and some ideas about the process. But in addition to that, I would say, go to the grassroots, go to the Black feminists, go to the queer people who are doing this work through an abolitionist lens, go to the people who are coming from community-based organizations and have learned through mistakes and failures and are coming to a place of leadership from a love for their people, for our people, and like a transparency about who we are as individuals. And no, I am not an LLC. No, I am not a corporation. I am an individual who has a very particular set of skills and experiences to offer. Here's what they are. Is this a good match for you? Come at that human level. Look for that humanity in partnership.
I just want to uplift the comment, well, many comments, about one in particular, from Andrea Williams. Y'all made this about the people and not the plan, if that makes sense. And yes, it very much makes sense. And again, I just want to, speaking of people, I also want to uplift like the people at CHLP. Like oftentimes, especially in legal and policy organizations, we're trained to talk about our work as if we aren't the people who would also be benefited by policy changes, like, or as if like we aren't the people who are also being targeted. And I love that there's a practice here of which all of us acknowledge like, that we are a part of this in so much as we are like are also helping to shape it. So for example, like it was Katira like who really helped to like think through like this idea of the ecology, you know, in that way, and like in certain images, but like it's many parts of this process and plan that, as Shana said, it's a Black feminist within CHLP, the abolitionist within CHLP, like the queer folks, like the working class people like within the org who also like, you know, like help to shape. And I think it just makes it much more powerful.
A word indeed. I do believe that we have come to, we've called out comments, we've asked these beautiful questions that are here. And I believe that we're going to have a few words from Mandisa.
Yeah.
Phenomenal executive director, phenomenal leader.
Thank you. Yeah. Again, I can't have enough words of gratitude to the people at CHLP and to the folks who like the past people of CHLP. Like this is also for them. Also want to thank, of course, the host committee. Like thank y'all for retweeting and posting and emailing and showing up in this call and to inviting people. Shana Turner, like there are no words for what you have led us in, like, and what you have stewarded us. Like, I think there was a time in which process doula was not a word that you saw for yourself. And I think that time is past because you doulaed us through this process in every sense of the word. And now's the time like to put the link in the chat so Nathan and others can actually have the full plan and can engage in it and download it and do all of the things. And as you open the plan and you turn to the last page, you'll see there's a quote from Toni Morrison. Dream the world as it ought to be. Don't let anybody convince you this is the way the world is and therefore must be. It must be the way it ought to be. You know, anytime I speak, I am going to quote a Black woman. And I think it's so necessary that we start with dreaming. Harriet Tubman is someone who I often reference. And she's many things, even though many people don't know much about her. Like she is somebody who was disabled, you know. She had epileptic seizures. She was a strategist, because you have to be a strategist as far as to do that kind of freedom work, and to do like that kind of consistent practice. She was also a U.S. general, something that often is missed, the Combahee River Raid. Before there was a Combahee River Collective, there was the raid. And something that she actually was before any of those is she was a dreamer. You have to dream and imagine that freedom is possible before you can even decide to embody it. And that's why it was so important that we started this process with a world that we want to see. Not asking the question of, is this possible in the next year? Is this possible under this administration? Fuck all that. What is the world that we want to see? How does that anchor us? How do we work back from there as to what it is that we're here to do? And how do we take that and put 4 years of things that we know are possible? And possibility is something that oftentimes folks focus on the foundations who support our work. But as Shana mentioned, it's the Black feminists and the queer feminists and the working class folks and the abolitionists who have always sustained our movement, who have always been the ones who supported us. And so this is another opportunity to help actualize, to help support us as we take this plan and we're ready to implement it over the next 4 years. So if we could move to the slide with the QR code, this is a chance to donate to CHLP. Again, in this moment, it's a chance to think about a sustaining movement to support our work. And it's also an opportunity to share with friends and family who are also considering end of year or early 2026 donations. And it's important because this is how we ultimately always sustain our work. And this is how we ultimately win. Again, oftentimes emphasis is put on the foundations, but historically, data research shows us it's us who support each other. And again, thinking of Black women who have anchored our work, I think of Zora Neale Hurston, who has said so many things. And the one that really sticks out is when she said, "Mama always told us to jump at the sun. We may not make it, but our feet will get off the ground." And your support is a chance to ensure that CHLP is able to keep our feet off the ground as we aim for the sun, because that is the liberation. So thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And I'm saying a thank you in advance for intentionally and lovingly engaging in our strategic plan. Thank you so much for joining us. And I have not been looking at the chat, but I want to make sure that the link to the plan so folks can download it is in the chat. But thank you for coming, y'all.